Editor. Let's talk to Sian Lewis, who's Senior Lecturer in Law at the University of Kent, specialising in international human rights and international migration. Thank you for being with us. There were some 4,000 people, as we heard, at Manston. Now suddenly there's pretty much nobody there. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it shows firstly that the power of protest really works. I, in my personal capacity, went along to a protest very recently and was shocked to see, outside Manston, was shocked to see that the people inside, I'm going to call them inmates because that's what they were detainees, they weren't even allowed to see out. There were hoardings preventing them from seeing out. These were inhumane conditions. And so I think, the government has misread the mood of the country. They think that everybody is against so-called illegal migrants. I don't call them that. I call them irregular migrants, people who come across the channel without possibilities of safe routes for migration. I think that they've misread the mood. I think they misunderstand that there are large swathes of the population who actively support the idea that these people are human beings and they should be treated consistently with their human rights and human dignity. So it's good news that it has been emptied. I think the worry is going to be in the detail. If they end up spending months and months in hotels without their applications for asylum being processed, this isn't a solution at all. This is just creating other problems, as we've heard from your previous reporter. It seems to me that a very practical solution to the problem, which the immigration minister really should turn his attention to, is allowing all asylum seekers access to the labour market, and then they can also then have access to legally regulated accommodation, in other words, a private accommodation or other forms of accommodation in the country, which they can then pay for from their earnings. There's anecdotal evidence and other evidence to suggest that there are people in these hotels with wide range of skills. I mentioned this the other day on your program, or a similar program on BBC News. There's anecdotal evidence that we've got doctors and dentists in hotels in Canterbury, where I live. Why not let them have access to the labour market? We're desperate for doctors and dentists. There are also people who have
Sorry, but I mean, surely if you're saying that, aren't you encouraging people to come over on small boats? And that is precisely what the government say they want to discourage, to deter. Because apart from anything else, it's very dangerous.
The only way to discourage people from using those boats is to open up safe routes for people to claim asylum. Remember, these people are claiming asylum and they are legally entitled to claim asylum under the Refugee Convention. They're not doing anything subversive. The only thing they've done is circumvent migration controls. And the reason why they've done that is there are no safe routes for them. There are very, very, very few safe routes for people to flee to the UK.
Are they all fleeing? Because we're hearing from the government about thousands of young, single Albanian men. What are they fleeing from? Albania is a safe country. It's applying to be part of the EU and NATO.
I can't comment in any detail about Albania, but I can say that approximately 70% of all people who come across in small boats successfully claim asylum. That is a huge proportion of those that are crossing in small boats. The other thing is that they're not only getting refugee status, but some of them are also getting humanitarian protection. That is another status that is available where it is unsafe to send a person back. Nobody can say that it's safe to send a person back anywhere without assessing their individual circumstances. We cannot tell whether someone is being persecuted in Albania just by saying that Albania is a safe country. That's a nonsense. We cannot make these kinds of generalizations. The whole purpose of having a refugee status determination procedure is to assess each individual case on its merits.
But that process is taking far too long, isn't it? Because we've got a backlog of well over 100,000 cases.
Yes, and I think the fault lies with the government here. The government needs to face up to the problem that is presented to it, that the numbers of people fleeing across the world are increasing year on year. This is a global problem. Spoken about this many times on BBC. This is not a localized problem. This is a global problem. The only problem we've got, it seems to me, or the one that the government's most concerned about, is the problem of people crossing the channel, which is incredibly dangerous. Now, if we had a system that acknowledged that the problem is global, that the number is increasing, that we need to do something about it, then we could set up our asylum system so that we have properly trained people, not people taken off the streets and just given 5 minutes of training, which is exactly what seems to be happening at the moment. 5 minutes obviously is an exaggeration, but 2 or 3 days of training and then sending them out on their own to, make life and death decisions about people's safety. What we need is a properly funded system. And it seems to me absolutely logical that at the same time we can open up the labour market so that these people are no longer seen to be a burden to the state, but actually contributing, giving us the benefit of their skills, contributing taxes, and no longer being holed up.
But as I mentioned before, you would then be attracting, like a magnet, even more people to get onto small boats to cross the channel to come here, because we would be offering them jobs at the moment they arrive.
I don't think the evidence is there. I think people use the small boats out of sheer desperation.
But when you say sheer desperation, they're already in France, which is a member of the European Union and again a safe country.
Well, they're desperate to claim asylum in a country that they have connections to. Usually, people usually come to the UK because they've got family members here, or because they speak English, or a combination of the two. If you imagine, being forced to flee from the UK in some terrible calamity, most of us would choose to go somewhere where we would A, be safe, but B, be with members of our own family, or at least members of our community, and where we could speak at least some of the language. The international refugee law does not require a person to stop in the first safe country. International refugee law allows a person the autonomy to choose the place where they claim asylum. And the other thing that I think is right to say is that Brexit is at play here. Whilst we were members of the European Union, we could expect people to be processed in France because of or at least some of them, because of the Dublin system. We are now no longer members of the European Union, and we cannot rely on the Dublin system for insisting on people being processed in the first country that they arrive in. Brexit is absolutely central to this problem, as it is for so many other problems, it seems to me.
All right, Sian Lewis, thank you very much. Senior Lecturer in Law at the University of Kent. Thank you for your time. And we can also speak now to the BBC South East.